Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome back, friends, to another session of fluid mechanics and rate processes. In the last session, we started talking about the various regimes that the flow can be in and how we can model them. So, we started with the flow equations, we non-dimensionalized them, and then took the case of Reynolds number going to 0, where we talked about the creeping flows or the Stokes equations. So, I will just review that a little bit for you and then we will move further. So, let me recollect for you what we were doing. We talked about the steady incompressible flow. And then we said, let us write down the flow equations, and these were divergence of V is 0, and then we had rho V dot gradient of V plus gradient of pressure, this is mu times del square V. Okay, the mass balance and then the force balance. And then we said let us non-dimensionalize them. And we use certain variables such that x star is given as x divided by a characteristic length scale. We used V star as V divided by some kind of a characteristic speed u, and for the pressure we simply said it is P divided by rho u square. And then we were able to non-dimensionalize the equations as the following form. So, divergence star times V star is 0, that is the mass balance, and then for the force balance we were able to write V star dot gradient star V star times the gradient star of P star. This is 1 over Reynolds P star. Okay. So, these were the two equations which are going to govern the flow and with the boundary conditions. A comment that we made is that there are three competing terms in this equation. This is inertial term, this is because of the pressure gradient. So, let me just call it a pressure term, and this is viscous. The argument being made is, in general we could have a flow where all these terms are important, but then we could also have a situation where perhaps only two of them are important. We further argued we cannot have a situation where only one of them is important, because we said suppose there is a term like the inertial term which is important, it must be balanced by some other mechanism, and therefore at least two of them should be important. So, the first case that we actually talked about was the Reynolds number tending to 0, which we said is the creeping flow, and we were able to get the Stokes approximation. And I tried to explain this to you by giving you results for a sphere. Okay. We talked about the stagnation pressure, we talked about the drag force and so on. Okay. We made a comment that the equations are linear. We also were able to show that there is a certain symmetry in the flow problem, especially if the geometry is symmetric. and we were able to make some remarks about the stagnation pressure, in the sense that the stagnation pressure coefficient can be fairly large. Okay. Now, what we want to do today is we want to look at the other limit. What if the Reynolds number goes to infinity? Okay. So, we want to talk about the inviscid flow, or sometimes it is also called as the frictionless flow. So, mu tends to 0, and therefore, if you look at your Reynolds number, which is defined as rho u L by mu, then in some sense as mu goes to 0, the Reynolds number goes to infinity. And in that case, you can see from these equations the divergence of V that remains as is, but out of these 3 terms here in the momentum equation, we should be able to now get rid of this term, and only 2 terms remain. So, let me then write down the Euler equations for you, and they are divergence of V equal to 0. So, I am back in the dimensional form, and further I can write that V dot gradient of V plus gradient of pressure, this is 0. These equations we refer to them as Euler equations. Okay. So, some remarks about these equations. So, the first remark I want to make is that these equations are nonlinear. So, unlike the Stokes equation, where we did not have the advection term, those equations were linear, but the Euler equations are still nonlinear, which really means that we will not be able to do the classical superposition of flows. So, we cannot say that 2 flows which satisfy the Euler equations can simply be added and they should also be a solution. That is not possible. However, if we go to a special case of irrotational flows, in one of the earlier sessions we had talked about what does rotationality of the flow imply. So, we looked at the gradient of velocity, and if you remember, we decomposed it into 2 parts, a symmetric part and a skew symmetric part. The skew symmetric part was related to the rotation of a fluid element through the curl of the velocity. So, we said that if the curl of the velocity field is 0 everywhere, then the flow is irrotational. All right. So, if we go to the special case of an inviscid flow and in addition it is irrotational, then it is possible to actually simplify these equations more, and what we can do is then we can write the velocity field as the gradient of a potential. Okay. So, this is actually a theorem which I am sure you must have looked at in your math course, that for a field which is irrotational, curl of velocity is 0, then that field V can be written simply as the gradient of a potential. So, phi is a potential and we refer to it as the velocity potential. And in that case, enormous simplifications are possible. So, we will come to that in a while, but let us move on and look at other properties. So, I want to continue on the property number 3, which is that the equation now is first order in V. Okay? Unlike the full Navier-Stokes where you had instead of a 0 here a viscous term which is second order, now this equation is first order in velocity. And what that does is that it kind of has an implication on the boundary conditions. Okay? So, not all boundary conditions on V can be satisfied. So, we will have to give up some boundary conditions, and then the question is which ones should we give up, and we have discussed this earlier. So, no slip, if you remember, was actually V equal to 0 for viscous flow, which had two components, V dot n equal to 0, where n is the unit normal vector, and V dot t, the tangential vector, unit vector, this is 0. So, when I have a no slip boundary condition on a solid surface which is stationary, so I am taking the special case where the solid surface is not moving, it is stationary, then the velocity of the fluid elements is 0 at the surface, and that would imply that both the normal and the tangential components are 0. That would be if I had a viscous flow. For inviscid flow, drop the V dot t equal to 0. So, this cannot be satisfied. So, we only satisfy V dot n equal to 0. That means the flow cannot go inside the solid body. Okay? So, this is the no penetration condition, if you recall. This is there is yet another property of the Euler equations, and that is that if V is solved from gradient of phi being V. So, suppose I am able to represent for an irrotational flow that my velocity is a function of the gradient of a potential, and I know the velocity field. Then P, the pressure field, can be determined using the Bernoulli's equation. So, this is a very significant change compared to the viscous flow. If you remember, in the viscous flow, the pressure and velocity are very tightly coupled. So, we will have to solve them together. On the other hand, we are saying if I look at the inviscid flow, and by some stroke of luck, if it also happens to be irrotational, then velocity can be obtained first, and then the pressure field can be obtained once the velocity has been calculated. So, they are kind of decoupled. Okay. So, you can see it is a very much easier to solve an Euler flow as compared to a viscous flow. The next question that we want to ask is that we have looked at two limits, the Reynolds number being 0 or close to 0, that is the Stokes flow, and the Reynolds number being so large that the flow is virtually inviscid. Okay, so, that is the Euler approximation. What if we have a situation that the Reynolds number is neither small nor large, somewhere in between? So the question we are asking is, what if RE is large but cannot neglect viscous effects? So what about this question? And it turns out that for this case also we should be able to do certain simplifications. So let me just remind you here what we are trying to do. You have the full Navier-Stokes equations, you know the boundary conditions. You really don't have to do anything to make assumptions. You can take the full equations and you can solve them and you will get a solution, no problem. But we are looking at a situation that can we simplify these equations? So for the case of RE going to 0 and RE going to infinity, it is obvious we can, Stokes flow and Euler flow. Now we are making another claim, that if the Reynolds number is reasonably large, and I will try to qualify that, what do we mean by large? But we do not want to neglect the viscous effects because they are important. For example, the skin friction. The Euler equations will not tell me anything about skin friction because I have assumed it is an inviscid flow. The full viscous equations are difficult to solve. It turns out we can still make an approximation. So let me show you what one can do. So suppose I look at the flow over a flat plate. Okay. So this is my flow, a uniform flow. And let me say this velocity is u coming into the plate. Now on the surface of the plate, because of the viscous effects, the no slip boundary condition, the fluid elements here will have a 0 speed. And then I would get something what is called a boundary layer. So let me sketch a boundary layer for you. This would be BL, where BL refers to the boundary layer. So this you can imagine comes from experimental observations, when people have made measurements, let us say in a wind tunnel or a water tunnel. If I want to sketch the velocity profiles, what is being said is that suppose I draw a velocity profile here. So far away from the plate in the lateral direction, I am going to get a speed which is exactly u. So let me trace the u here. So this is u. But then as I come to the plate, this speed is 0. So what is being claimed is that outside the boundary layer, I have a speed of u. But then inside the boundary layer, my speed increases from 0 to u. So this is going to be my profile. If I try to draw a profile at another location, let us say somewhere here. So this would be u. And then I would get a speed of u here. And in fact, my speed would go from 0 to this speed inside the boundary layer. So in other words, what we are claiming is that if I shade this region, then here I am going to get viscous effects. And outside the boundary layer, because my flow seems to be uniform, I have no viscous effects here. In fact, what I can do is, I can treat this flow as some kind of an inner flow, because it is close to the body, and this flow can be treated as an outer flow. This name comes from some kind of an asymptotic analysis. So, when we have second order differential equations, what is being said is that when you go away from the wall, they become first order. Okay, so, that is the name given to the mathematical solution as the outer solution, and we are simply calling it as outer flow. And here they stay second order because the viscous effects are important, so that term is retained, and we call them as inner flow. Okay. So, what is being claimed now is the following. If I had a flow where the Reynolds number is large, suppose my Reynolds number was not large, okay, that means the viscous effects are important everywhere. So, there is no boundary layer as such. I mean, the velocity varies from 0 to whatever u over a large distance y. Then I cannot introduce this concept of a boundary layer. The boundary layer is very thick, and in fact it could span the whole flow, as you would see in a Stokes flow. Okay. In Stokes flow you do not have a boundary layer, the viscous effects are important everywhere. Okay. So, if we had a large Reynolds number, the claim is that the viscous effects are important in a small region close to the surface of the body, and that we are calling as the boundary layer. But outside the boundary layer, we can neglect those viscous effects, and we can treat the flow as if it is an inviscid flow. So, the claim is outer flow is inviscid, and this could be given by Euler equations, which we have already seen. On the other hand, for the inner flow, we will have to now develop what are called as the boundary layer equations. And the hope is that these equations are going to be simpler than the full Navier-Stokes equations. Okay? So, you really have two choices as a fluid mechanicist. You can take the full Navier-Stokes and you can solve them everywhere. You do not need to do this monkey business about separating the inner flow and the outer flow. Okay? But you will probably need a computer for that. Okay? You cannot get, in most cases, an analytical solution. But if you are an engineer and you want a simple way of doing it, you will say, all right, I will make an approximation. Let me identify what this height is. So, let me call this height as delta, and I would refer to delta as the boundary layer thickness. I do not know so far what this length scale would be. It appears to be much smaller than the length of the plate. Okay, it is in the lateral direction. But if I knew this length, then what I am claiming is that outside for y greater than delta, I will assume the flow to be inviscid by Euler equations, and within this 0 to delta, I will derive these simpler equations called the boundary layer equations and solve them. And then somehow magically I would have a solution outside, a solution inside. I patch them together and I get an approximate solution of the full equations. How is the boundary layer thickness defined? Saying that it approaches u would cause difficulty in measurements. So, what people say is that if I start from the wall and I start measuring what is the speed, so if Vx is my speed, so Vx at y equal to delta is roughly 99% of u. Okay. So, that is how I would define a boundary layer thickness. Okay. It is very close to the free stream speed, but you allow a difference of about 1%.